And now it's going up. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sustainiacs. I am Michael Vincent. I'm always the Sustainiac. I found another one though. You guys keep popping up everywhere. You guys are all over the joint, the smart ones. Anyways, it's Conor Carlin, and he is. So you are you CEO and founder of Clefs Advisory?
We can use any number of grandiose terms to
Fantastic.
point out the fact that I'm a company of one, so I can call
He's the
myself
Grand
anything from
Sultan of
principal to
Clefs.
managing director. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. But so you guys, is it true that you're actually operating at the nexus of plastics and sustainability?
Absolutely.
It is. All right. Fantastic. So let's get into it, brother. How are you doing today?
Good. Let me close my window for that in case we get some lawnmower interference here.
Oh, okay. Well, it is springtime, so why not? I mean, as long as you're not
Yes.
allergic to the grass pollen coming in and start sneezing
Springtime
everywhere.
in Massachusetts, you can't really put away the snowblower until after tax day. And in fact, yesterday I was up north of Boston and it was snowing. So
Yeah.
we're there.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Chattanooga. I've been cutting my grass for a month already.
Yeah,
So,
good for you.
yeah, no, there's probably not going to snow here. It rarely does anyways, but yeah. So what do you guys? So what is? Tell us about Clef's Advisory. What are you guys doing there?
Yeah. So
What does it mean operating at the nexus of plastics and sustainability?
Yeah, so I mean, a little bit of background. I mean, I've been sort of living this and working to verbalize it in such a way that can help promote what's really going on um, at the business end of the stick here, right?
Right.
Plastics are in the news for all sorts of reasons, most of them not very favorable, for some justifiable reasons. Um, But plastics they haven't really been around that long, in any commercial sense. They've only really been around since the 50s.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
so understanding, the big sweep of material science and the history of everything that we've ever used and dug up and refined and mined, over the years, plastics, it's hard to put things in context when you're right in the middle of it. But, looking more broadly, there's just a lot behind it. And there's not just one type of plastic either, right? There's so many different types of it, enabling people to do things that they would just weren't able to do before. Is I mean, it's sort of mind-boggling. And the way algorithms work now, my LinkedIn feed. I mean, there's nothing else happening in the world except people arguing over whether or not plastics are good or bad for the environment. I'm sure there's something else happening in the world. That there might be some other international news happening at this point in time, but I wouldn't really know it from my LinkedIn feed. So for better or for worse, I've gone very deep in this particular space
Mm.
and have used that now, like all that sort of knowledge and uh, gray areas and uncertainty and ambivalence and ambiguities, and have sort of brought all that to bear now in a consulting group that really sort of helps people understand exactly what it means and what the nuances are and why it's not one size fits all.
Hmm. So how long have you been in this space?
Well, I mean, I went to high school in California, and I can remember way back then. We had our, we recycled all of our cans in school. I mean, they had them out.
Mm.
It was sort of normal. California is at the vanguard of a lot of different things, and I think that was definitely true there too. But I can remember distinctly, like a lot of people just not littering, like putting stuff in their pockets. And California is beautiful, right? And a lot of people wanted to keep it that way, and so, maybe that was the first sort of inkling of how it got into my mind, but more substantially was just before making the decision to go to business school, to really sort of get some more financial hard skills and underpinning of how business and sustainability would work. I went deep into some books. Um, the biggest one was probably The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken. And
Mm.
that was the thing that really kind of set me off on the mission to prove that you can use business for positive ends, right? It doesn't always have to be, linear, make, take, pollute. There are models out there. People can be thoughtful. There's a lot of intelligent, thoughtful people that are doing great things, proving it. Um, and when you dig and when you go down that rabbit hole, you just find a whole wide, beautiful world of people trying crazy things, biomimicry and startups and new types of materials, new types of business models. It's amazing how many people are actually doing good work in this particular space, and just a
Yeah.
lot of it just isn't always seen, right?
Now it really isn't seen, and the argument is like you said before that business is this linear extract, use, and pollute, right? Or just extract, use it, and throw it away, right? Like wealth extraction just for the sake of wealth extraction, right? Just building wealth for the. I mean, business should be always should have been, should be, and should always be for the betterment of the society, which
Well,
includes the environment. In my mind, there shouldn't be business just for the sake of extraction of wealth. That's not a good business model in my mind. I don't know how that's a good business model. I mean, it's like right now everybody's in the U.S. is freaking out over their 401ks. Okay, that's because you're concerned about your wealth rather than the well-being of the society and Earth and security, etc. And we can get into. I don't want to go any further than that, but that's the dichotomy. Is it wealth or is it the betterment of society and the environment? No, it's both. They live together, and when they go one way too far, that's not good, right? It's that marriage in the middle that you speak of. The it, what is it? The economy of ecology.
the ecology of commerce.
The ecology of commerce. Okay,
Yeah.
is I mean that's where it is. That's the nexus, right?
Absolutely. I mean, right. I mean, you have to think in terms of systems, right? You have to think in terms of ecosystems. You think like the
Mm-hmm.
butterfly effect concept. People have heard of that. They understand what it is. But in big, diverse, complex countries and economies like ours, it's hard to get people to engage in joined up thinking where everybody is better off, right? I mean, that's sounds vaguely socialist, and we're not so keen on that stuff on this side of the
Well, no,
Atlantic.
I,
But
I agree, and I walk that fine line. With, I mean, I don't think I'm walking that fine line, and I don't think you're walking that fine line, but it certainly is in the eyes of public perception. At least the part that is already leery or suspicious of sustainability and all that type of stuff. Because I mean, let's face it, most humans only read what and only glean from what they read or see or hear that which supports their already preconceived notions, right? The
right, yeah.
ability or the desire to change is not that. So if they peg us and say, "Oh, you said this, therefore you're a socialist," we're never going to change their mind. I am not. I'm 100% a capitalist. All I'm saying is it is not right to just extract wealth. There should be some benefit to society for it,
Right. I
right?
mean, you're right. I mean, these things are ultimately self-defeating, and they're by definition unsustainable when you can't replenish what you've taken. And there's
Exactly.
many examples of this over the years, right? I mean, the shooting buffalo, killing things until there's total collapse, and then you just run out, and then you go on to something else, right? I mean, that's not effective in the long run, but in the long run, we're all dead. So you got to figure out, in the short to medium term, what's going to work, what's going to allow people to find that balance. And I think, there's more and more people talking about and recognizing that like natural capital is a real thing. It can be valued. In fact, that was a great book as well, Natural Capitalism. That was very
Okay.
profound and written quite some time ago. When it's only now sort of getting a little bit more wider recognition when some of the big um, financial firms, are starting to use it. So, like anything else, this might be an interesting one to, the type of Google search when you see how common the common usage of a particular word over time or a phrase. I think it might be interesting to pop natural capital and see what's happening. I haven't done
Hmm.
that.
That is really that's when we keep digging and going into so was that book and getting into it is did you see this as a business opportunity to get in and start consulting building Clefs advisory, or did you start studying this in school as as more of a altruistic or effort? What was your views on it? Was it, hey, look, because I contend sustainability, et cetera, is this huge blue ocean of opportunity for business and entrepreneurs, right? So your motivation to go do it, was it like, look, hey, we can live together, we can bring these two together, and that's the importance, or what was that concept in
Yeah,
your
I mean,
mind?
I mean, trying to think back exactly to what, the feeling or thought was at the time. I forget what led to finding that book, if it was a recommendation or if I'd made the decision. But I knew what I was doing before. It wasn't enough, and it wasn't aligned with a deeper passion and desire to not be environmentally, not degrading the environment. Right? We have to find ways to, you can't do business as usual, but you can still do business, and there have to be ways that we can do it beyond what we've done up to this point. And this is 15 years ago, so it's not that long ago. But this was around the time, I live up in Boston and Cambridge. I mean, and I chose to go to Babson College because their MBA program very specifically had a program called Management Consulting Field Experience. And
Mm,
that put a cohort of students, like a group of 4 or 6 students, actually working as consultants for startups. And they had a big push into clean tech at the
mm,
time. So this was companies getting involved in wind power and solar power, energy efficiency software, blue green algae for water treatment, um, cellulosic ethanol to replace fossil based fuels. I mean, there were so many opportunities, and so that was a great time to sort of take what I read in that book and see it in action with these companies while learning how to do the business startup part of it, right? Which include the strategy. We did all the blue ocean type discussions.
mm-hmm.
Working together in teams, doing financial modeling, looking at market positioning and overall strategy, impacts of different government policy, like the renewable fuel mandate, things like that. So that was a very dynamic time. And again, up here in Boston and Cambridge, I mean, this was happening at MIT, at Boston University, at Babson, Boston College. So there was a huge cohort amongst all the business schools getting into all of these startups and going to conferences and startup competitions and rocket pitches. And it was really, really exciting because there were so many people working in that space. And a lot of startups fail. Yeah, a lot of them just kind of blow up, or just don't get traction, or they
Sure.
have to pivot and change. And
Yeah.
you get to see all of that.
Yeah, and that happens. That happens to everybody. Do you think it's still as vibrant today, the push towards it, as it was back then?
Um, it's hard to say because it was the first. It's what I call clean tech 1.0 was that particular point in time, right?
Mm,
Um, the venture capital guys were heavily involved, and it didn't work out so well in that time. So that was right around 2008, 2010. So the stock market crash was happening anyway, but the investments that were put in the years around that and shortly thereafter didn't really pan out. This was around the time, I think, when Solyndra was the sort of the big bugbear,
mm.
that some people try to hang around the neck of the administration at the time, as if all clean tech is BS.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
a waste
yeah,
of
yeah,
time. Don't pick winners and losers, sort of thing. But
yeah.
I mean, it's not as if people didn't stop trying. So it's matured, like anything else, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
and I'm not saying my timeline's the only one. There's probably others who've been around a little bit longer who might have a slightly different take on it. But there's no shortage of people still thinking about it. I think a little bit of it has got muddled as ESG as a concept has arrived. ESG wasn't a thing then. It was a corporate. It came out of like EH&S, which is environmental health and safety,
Right,
and
right,
then
right, right.
CSR for corporate social responsibility, all the other acronyms that come along with it. But when you got into ESG, in my mind, then it started getting muddied and we kind of lost our way a little bit, at least on the focus on the clean tech and environmental benefits that will come with
Yeah,
thinking about sustainability.
yeah. It seemed like the acronyms come about, and then it turns into, like you said, there's it's like this scam, or this the this nefarious thing to just suck profit like the sustainability movement is there to just extract wealth when it is the exact
Right.
opposite.
And like this
It's the exact opposite.
world
But that's
government takeover,
yeah,
and yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Because like anything else, it gets diluted, the meaning gets lost. Everybody jumps on, they cheapen it. You get greenwashing, green hushing. You get people getting fined for saying things that aren't true.
yeah.
All that momentum. Just there's always going to be bad actors, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So the people who are are feel this in their core, who focus on the environmental element of it, are going to be around. Like they will be successful in terms of those technologies and business models. It's the corporatization and reporting and the alphabet soup of CDR and TFCD and GHG, GWP. So much of this has become a box checking exercise at bigger corporates for risk management, which isn't terrible. I mean, especially trying to think about environmental risks, both that the company poses to the environment or that their environment poses to them. If you're operating in an area where you're heavily dependent on water for your carbonated soft drinks or something, and you find out all of a sudden that there's going to be problems with the water supply for any number of reasons, like failing infrastructure or um, yeah,
Well, I mean,
problems with
other
pipes
than the
or
obvious human connection, what's the difference between laws against child labor and abuse of labor or abuse of the environment and toxifying the environment?
what.
Why is one considered, oh, this is a government scam, and the other like, oh yeah, we can't have that happen?
Well, I mean,
You know what I mean? I mean
I know, I get
that's
it.
kind of a rhetorical question. I'm not. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just. I'm just saying. I'm agreeing with you by saying, hey, this rhetorical question. You tell me what the hell's the difference?
I think, I mean, the
If
NRDC
you
at
know,
one point, I don't know if it's still there. Somebody has to stand up for the environment, right? I mean, that
yeah,
was
yeah. Well,
people like that weren't
but
elected.
I don't think chaining yourself to a bulldozer or a tree is the way to get it done. That just makes it even more polarizing. I think the way to get it done is through efforts like yourself and myself, quite frankly, is to show people, look, this is business 101. It just makes complete sense. And if you really get into ESG is business 101. You don't treat your employees like crap. You make sure they're happy, they're productive, and they're working well. You do proper governance so that you're governing your business in a proper way, and it's ethical and it's legally governed, et cetera. And you treat the environment the exact way. You can't, like,
Right.
Hershey's isn't going to go be around much longer if they don't invest the $500 million that they did in the cocoa farmers, right? I mean, they did that because of business, because it's the right thing to do for the business. The right thing to do by the people and their sources and their resources is the right thing for the business. There's no separation of it, right?
You're right.
Just
I mean, it seems so simple when you put it like that, Michael, but not everybody agrees. Uh, and these things shouldn't even need a name, right? I mean, you shouldn't have to have a policy that says don't treat your people like shit, or
it does seem
don't
ridiculous, but you do,
don't
right?
lie, don't cheat, don't steal. I mean, you learn this when you're a kid,
Yeah,
right? I mean, but businesses as entities, as corporations, are somewhat sociopathic in some of the behavior. And so, and there's been a lot of economic dogma over the years that says, that business is only it serves the interests of the shareholders. And then we get into stakeholder capitalism recently as well, which was, a great step forward, I thought, but again, sort of got overused and then became easy to ridicule and then became part of the culture wars and became part of tribal identity. Um, so, it
yeah.
was like, good, there's a lot of good intentions go awry, I think, in this world.
Well, they get
On
hijacked. A lot of it
sustainability.
gets
They totally get
hijacked.
hijacked. Yep. Yep.
And that's one of the things. I believe that there was this, not necessarily an attempt to destroy, but there was the opportunity to argue against sustainability and those sustainability efforts because it was being hijacked by the fringe, right? And therefore, the fringe of the other side goes, aha, there it is. When that wasn't what and isn't what you and I and others that continue to persist, and quite frankly are starting to see some great success and people starting to understand this in major corporations, that this is actually business 101. I mean, I talk to people like Exxon and Dow and that type of stuff. And these are the evil giants that are polluting the world. No, they have huge sustainability programs
They
for
do. They do.
reclamation and bringing it back. Procter and Gamble and so on and so forth. These behemoths that people think are just, they're the ones who are greenwashing and are just extraction of wealth. No, Dow came up with the bottom of the pyramid decades ago. Supporting, you got to support that bottom of the pyramid, otherwise it crumbles.
Right.
These societies down here are the ones you need to focus on and uplift, because that makes everything stronger. And that's sustainability in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Right. That which can be replenished. Right. I mean, we've overthought it. We've used it too much. We say things like more or less sustainable, which in my view are incorrect terms. And something is either sustainable or it isn't. It can't be more or less.
It reminds me of Seinfeld, is that there are no big coincidences or small coincidences. There are only coincidences.
Right.
That whole argument, right?
Right. I mean, you can have a higher or lower environmental impact, a higher or lower environmental footprint, handprint. I mean, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of tools available to be able to measure this stuff now. Obviously life cycle inventories, life cycle assessments. I mean, they're sort of imperfect in some ways, but they've developed a lot and evolved over the last 20 years or so. Um, but marketers of the world, and our attention span is zapped. So things have to get, we simplify the complex and we complexify the simple. Sometimes to the detriment of those of the original points, right? I mean, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't pollute. I mean, shouldn't be that hard to figure out. But when you're saying, well, I've made this, biodegradable additive, that you can't test, you can't prove, and you market it because you
Yeah.
think you're responding to some consumer report or consumer sentiment survey that says people want to have compostable packaging, for example, right? I mean, that's not really helpful in the big picture, but it's very difficult. You can't tell people not to do that either, right? You can't. We're not centrally planned economies. You can't say like you're only allowed to work on this or you're only allowed to work on that. The market will throw up a bunch of ideas, and some of them will fail, and some of them will survive. Some that survive may survive based on hype, or something else, and some will survive based on their ability to attract investment and make profits and grow and strengthen, and hopefully they're doing that on the basis of reducing the environmental footprint of something that was previously deleterious or harmful.
Yeah, and that I contend that that's the way it absolutely should be. Is the latter. You run up against economies, et cetera, that are planned, right, versus those free, and the planned are more efficient, but they're more efficient in their mission, right? The free are more efficient in producing the right mission, right? Or the ethical mission or the environmental issue. Because it will always bubble to the top. The correct will always bubble to the top eventually, given a free market, in my mind.
Mm, I don't know, maybe.
Well, maybe I'm an optimist, but I mean, it seems to be doing that right now. Like we've had these extreme swings in capitalism that went to wealth extraction just for wealth extraction. But right now, in my view, watching what is going on in world economics and discussing this with major corporations, et cetera, ethical, not necessarily ethical, but conscious or virtuous capitalism seems to be on the
Mm,
rise again. uh, Doing things the right way. Because I do believe that even though you do see, like you talk about green hushing, you do see corporations rolling back their announcements of, here's our target, there's our target, et cetera. And despite the headlines that come out and say, hey, this company got rid of all of their green targets or all their sustainability targets, it's not true. they quit reporting on it because they don't have to, and it just makes them a target of those that are against it. They're still in there. If you read the details, they're still trying to be more sustainable because they figured it out. Sustainability is a business 101 process. It's how you should be running your business, period.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that more people are doing it than before, and even if it's imperfect, and even if they, to be an optimist, to be generous about it, making announcements about targets that you can't hit. Okay, you have to treat them as aspirational, but the cynic will say, "You see, I told you you could never do it," right? So
That's true.
it's on balance. It's probably better to make the effort, right, in the right direction. Say that in the plastics world, right, when they were talking about having targets, 25 by 25. I mean, why not 23 by 28? It was just, it wasn't really based on, and it was kind of soundbitey to have it,
Yeah.
30 by 30 and 25 by 25 and stuff like that. Even though, I mean, like any simple look at the supply and demand, you knew that wasn't going to be possible, right? Because there's just not enough material out there. The economics were totally upside down, and the infrastructure wasn't available on the back end either. So they probably shouldn't have said what they said if they were aiming for accuracy, but if they're aiming for aspirational thinking and sending a signal and getting other people to come into it, then on balance, I suppose we have to say that it's better than nothing, but it's still not good enough.
I agree, but I mean that opens up part of it to me where you see companies' efforts and a result green hushing is the if they don't meet 100% of their target, they failed. This is not true.
Right.
That's a result of our insane financial institution that we've developed, an expectation and 401ks, et cetera, which is just wealth for wealth's sake. The whole the whole stock market, et cetera, which is just it doesn't matter how it happens. It's shareholder primacy, right? And that is, to me, that's the core that is wrong. It shouldn't be that way. The story shouldn't just be how profitable you are, and it's only the story because we made it the story. It's the only
Right. I
reason.
mean, it's a bit
There
of a
is no
mental
other reason. It
model.
just is because we made it that way. It doesn't have to be that way.
No, these are models that people have to build frameworks and systems, in a big complex economy to be able to move things along, right? I mean, as things get
Right.
bigger, more complex, you need more middle managers, you need more frameworks, but scoring and assessments like that on things like, big environmental targets and goals, it's not like you're going to sit in front of your boss and say, well, we said you were going to hit 100% of your goals, but you only got 65, so you're fired. It's not, we shouldn't use that mental model on things like big
Exactly.
environmental goals, right? Because just like in, some recent discussion about GDP doesn't capture, a society's well-being, or mother's work, or so many other things that contribute to the benefit of society, they're not captured in that number. It's you get stuck in a mental model, um, and part of that is just is sort of organic. It just sort of happens because we're used to managing a certain way. But management
Mm.
models have changed over the years too, right? I mean, there's, Gen X, like myself, and the other generations coming behind us, have sort of bridged a couple of different worlds, right? I mean, from from cassettes and fax machines and rotary phones all the way over to, like, perplexity AI and, like, coding yourself, right? I mean, you've seen that many changes. That's also true of business models and other types of patterns and innovative thinking, that will shift.
Yeah. Yep. 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 So we haven't even really gotten into it. It's been fantastic, fantastic discussion. But I'd like to bring it back towards what you're doing at Clefs Advisory, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, what, how are you engaging with the companies? I mean, it is working at the nexus of plastics and sustainability. So, when you're talking about sustainability and working with companies, you are specifically working with plastics. Is it uh, from that? So are you dealing from the actual chemical polymer manufacturing or the plastics packaging or dealing with plastics, reclaiming after useful life or all of the above? Where is your where's your sweet spot? What are you doing?
So for us, it's more probably like from conversion through to end of life management, right? So not at the steam cracking level, right? I
Okay.
mean, that's a huge, big petrochemical world. Lots of specialized information. We keep an eye on it. Obviously, things like trade flows and new material developments coming out of there, and costs. So you always have to be aware of that. Um, but there's sort of two levels of it. One is like at the strategic level, like how do we really think about sustainability? What does it mean? That let's go through your statements, let's go through your business model, and assuming that this does matter to you, are you aligned with your business model and the approach that you're sending out into the world? First of all, are you, like I said before, I don't want people who are saying they're more or less sustainable. You don't want to be seeing a lot of scorecards that don't have a lot of like sort of philosophical underpinnings. So there's that strategic view first. That's a little bit more vague, and it requires a different type of engagement with different companies, right? At the tactical level, it's much more precise and very specifically now just sort of given the focus on uh, policy impacting packaging through extended producer responsibility or EPR programs, right? Or outright material bans or plastics
Mm.
replacements or
Hmm.
paperization, or increasing recycled content, understanding the material property. So there's pathways that we have to navigate with people to make sure that their package type or their product is going to work in the system as it's going to exist in 5 years time, not necessarily anymore today,
So
right?
where
So
you have a crystal ball back there somewhere on one of those shelves that you can figure out where it's
uh,
going to be in 5 years. That's got to
well,
be a hard thing to do. I mean, no,
you have to
all
handicap some
joking
things.
aside, that's got to be
Yeah.
difficult to do, right? Because I mean, you're talking about a living, breathing legislation that is still being developed in many cases.
In the US for sure, the European one is pretty fixed.
Oh, is it
And
okay? So the Europeans, I know they've been ahead of us quite a ways. I didn't know if there was still change. Do you see the tariff wars or issues that are going now being impacting any of that? Is that you think that's going to be involved in the statement of other trade barriers?
that is hard to say.
It is
I
hard to
mean,
say. I just wonder what your
just even
opinion
this
is.
week, I mean, as I understand it, and I haven't dug fully in, but plastic the resins themselves are exempted from
Okay,
trade
all right, gotcha.
from the imposition of tariffs. So we import a
Okay.
fair bit of PET resin, right? Number one, that's used for bottles
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
thermoforms and things like that. We and fiber and strapping. Um, in fact, more PET in the world is used for fiber than packaging, which is not something that people always think about.
Right.
So we import a fair bit of that because we don't have enough supply to make it here, but we export a ton of polyethylene of PE because we've got great internal competitive advantage in terms of our cost structure and our natural resources in terms of shale shale gas in particular for
Mm.
ethane. So we export an awful lot of that. It's very very cost effective for us to do. So is that starting to see? It sounds like because our exporters could get nailed, that we're going to be okay with coming in. So at least for the moment, it seems like resin is exempt. Molds, machines,
I mean, but what about like content, right? Because if you're going to deal with and sell product in the EU, you've got to have certain GHG standards, right? Right for the carbon taxes, et cetera, is content. And I've got a buddy in the bit. Well, I deal with a lot of people in the business who are now looking at, okay, we've got to change the content of our products to include X amount of post-consumer or post-industrial
right?
plastics in order to continue to sell our product in the EU after I think 2026, or maybe it's even taking effect now. But do you see that being part of the trade issues, or that's just not on the table?
I mean, finished goods, will be classified under very different codes. The fact that something is made of plastic is really going to matter on what its next code is, or SIC code, or harmonized
Yeah.
tariff schedule, right? The HTS. I mean, like the first six numbers, if you're in that and that's tariff, then you're going to get hit. So,
Yeah,
um,
your harmonized tariff code doesn't delineate between content of plastic. It's just plastic.
it might not. I mean, so you can, I mean, as I understand HTS, you can go out to eight figures, you can go out to 10 numbers. And if you're in 10 numbers because you're somehow more specialized and you think you're not covered, it doesn't matter if you're in that first six and that's a tariffed item, then you're getting hit with it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
gotcha. After the first six, it doesn't matter anyways, does it?
right, exactly.
I
Yeah.
got you. Okay, all right, understood. I took you off topic. I forgot where you were. Oh, you're dealing with who are the companies that you're dealing with, and you said you're
Oh yeah,
dealing
so
more with.
right, so
Yeah.
for the tactical stuff then, so people who have who are making efforts to do things like um, so lightweighting is fairly well understood, right?
Uh
It
huh.
like another way of thinking about lightweighting is source reduction, using less. This is an element of sustainability and efficiency. Doing more with less is generally efficient. It's generally a good thing. Um, the emerging irony, I think, or split incentive, as I call it, is if you're in plastics recycling, you don't really want lighter weight stuff because there's less of it, right? So you need to collect more volume to get the same weight, and things are valued on weight, not volume per se, right? So
Mm.
if you're a recycler and it took you, I don't know, take 10 shampoo bottles to equal a certain output, and you lightweight all those shampoo bottles, now it takes you 12 or 14 to do that, right? Because each one is weighs less and is therefore worth less. So but you're solving for GHG reduction by using less material, right? Less material, lower carbon footprint, better LCA score, lower impact. All this is all very, very good. But if you're in the recycling part of the world, like that's not so good because the value is lower, and so now you've got to work harder to get the same amount of value on the other side. So
But in a sense, you're taking GHG. You might be taking down your emissions or your carbon footprint here, but raising it there because I've got to run my machines the same amount of time to get less or increase my running rate, so I'm consuming more energy. Plus, you've got to think about if you are you cubing out a a unit of transportation before you weight out that that capacity of transportation, that unit of capacity, because that determines your as well, right? If I've got to ship
absolutely right,
1.5 containers now
exactly
instead of one, that now I've increased my carbon footprint by 50%.
right, yeah, exactly. I mean, bulk density is a big part of that, right? If something is dense and has high bulk density, then you
It's
can
an
pack a lot
interesting
of stuff.
concept because I spoke with a woman and she advised us a couple times in my business starting up. I'm in recycling of plastics, and she talked about she was from the Northeast and how she fought against a ban on plastic bags because and got plastic bags reinstituted and allowed in this community, rather large community, way northeast. And the reason behind it was when the plastic bag recycling was actually like the core. It was the cornerstone of their recycling. And once they took that away, the rest of the recycling collapsed.
Right.
So in a good trying to do the right thing, there was this unintended negative consequence where it's like, okay, so let's ban all plastic bags. Well, then you don't know how much of that. Like if we got rid of plastic bottles, right? There'd be virtually no recycling in the United States. It's like the
That's
core
right.
that
I mean,
supports
and
everything
everything
else.
will right, right, and things will be heavier, and you know,
Yeah,
trade-offs are very tough, right? I mean, like
yeah.
it seems like that there's no perfect outcome, and you don't want to be so harsh to say as well. We're going to have to break some eggs to make the omelet, but it seems like in some case we're going to have to pick. What's the least worst outcome that we can achieve in this, right? Is source reduction a better environmental outcome than increased recycling? That's really difficult to say.
Hey, I've been on the planet a number of times. I've traveled around the sun a number of times, better than 50 times. And I've been on more than one journey where I was going the wrong way and it sucked, but I actually had to backtrack and start over. And it was painful and we broke a few eggs, so to speak. But to
Hmm.
continue on the wrong path was far worse. You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
you
Right. I
know,
mean, and the other part, I mean, and globally, I mean, the parts of the world that struggle most with this, just aren't able to deal with it, right? Plastics are tougher. I mean, they're so efficient, right? We can make so much of it so quickly, so cheaply. Um, I mean, the way to think about it is you take like a very large diameter pipe and it's very short, and like you go from your inputs, like your oil and gas inputs through the refinery out to the pellet, right? It's very short, it's very big, it's very fast. But on the recycling side, I mean, you got to take like a 50-ton truck, at 10 miles an hour and stop every 10 seconds to pick up 96 gallons of mixed materials.
Yeah.
It's just, it's nowhere near as efficient, and so it
And
makes
then
it very
separate it
difficult.
all and travel it and yeah, and the volume to weight metrics and value to weight or
Yeah.
density are so poor. The logistics is really what kills it.
Yeah,
It
it's a huge
absolutely
part of it,
is.
right? There's just cost at every step, right? And there's so few steps in some of the polymer production that it's just incredibly efficient.
So when you're working with these companies, you're going through. Are you advising mostly on the the extended producers, the EPR
Yeah,
legislation and types, and
yeah,
trade?
there are a couple of key projects today that's very much the focus. It's very, very timely, right? So you have um, emergent EPR legislation here, which we can track and model to be ready for. But there's also the directives from Europe, which are now have gone from a directive into a law, and so certain products will be banned, literally will be banned from the market by 2032 if they don't score according to the European Union's scoring, or the Commission's scoring for that. It has to be A, B, or C grade, and the way that you achieve that grade is by like a series of protocols and tests, and so helping people navigate that whole process, almost like in a project management sense, is a big part of it, right? Identifying how do you get ready for this. What do we know is going to be a problem even before we go into it, right? Don't just
Yeah,
say, hey, here's my package, my product, let's throw it through the system and see what happens. You might have to make some adjustments even before that, knowing what we know already, right? So
right.
we help people understand how to think about this before they just jump in with 2 feet, um, and try to
Is
think
it mature
strategically.
enough that you're able to start certifying and therefore, or how is that going to work? I mean, are people going to have to have this stamp of approval on their products and their
Yeah.
commercial invoices and then or they're going to be they can't be inspecting everything and testing everything, obviously, right? So how are you assisting in them getting certified in some way? Is there a way to get that certification?
Yeah, there's a couple of third-party bodies out there on both in Europe and the US, for technical recyclability. There's groups like the Association of Plastics Recyclers is one that has published extensive design guidelines. So I mean, there's helpful guides out there, and people can figure it out. But does that fit the purpose of whatever the package is intended to do? Right. Sometimes you
Yeah,
need
that's the problem.
different layers or different constructions, for whatever
Sure.
reason. If it's um, to protect against something in fragility in transportation, or oxygen and water vapor transmission rates. All these things, you still have to meet the needs of what primordial packaging is designed to do, right? And people from Exxon and Dow have done a tremendous amount of work on this in developing mono materials and things that are simpler to recycle. They're removing incompatibilities. This is a big part of it, and that's a big driver in some of these design for recycling guides in both Europe and in the States, right? They're very clear about that. Eliminate complexity, reduce incompatibilities, use living hinges. Don't use incompatible olefins and polyesters.
Yeah.
There's a
And,
lot
and
of things
and
that
for
you
the
can do.
people listening that don't understand exactly what you're talking about the fact that right now, even within a type of plastics, there are so many variations that the contamination rate of the exact same type of plastics to the normalized person to like someone like myself, I would never ever, well, this is an olefin, that's an olefin, and they're both number X, and therefore they should go. They can't because of the chemical makeup, and that really is one of the big hindrances in recycling.
Yeah, I mean, and it's what people are mostly talking about is packaging that we interact with on a daily basis, from the perimeter
Yeah.
of the supermarket or so on. But where it gets even more difficult is then when you get into the subsector in medical packaging or medical plastics in general. These things are are exempted from a lot of the rules, or they're covered by FDA regulations. A lot of them are just collected for incineration with biohazard inside hospitals. It's not like you can have a reverse vending machine in a hospital where we put an Ozempic pen in and like get your 5 cents back. And by the way, like things like the Ozempic pens and others, I mean, these are made with like 6 or 7 different types of plastic for very strict performance. From polycarbonate to nylons to PETs to styrenes.
Yes.
Those things are not designed for recycling at all.
No. No.
and there's no way they're going to happen anyway because of the FDA and hygiene and litigation concerns that all come with it.
Well, you
So
certainly don't want
medical
to turn them
plastics are
into a
very,
Coke bottle.
yeah, it's definitely, it's right. It's a very distinct subsector where there's an awful lot of plastics used, still with tremendous health and hygiene benefits that we didn't have 50 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah, no, the design is purposeful and needs to be there. And so there's going to have to be other ways. So those are exempt from some of these laws, et cetera. And so
Hmm.
because of the necessity of that complex design.
Partly, and also because they're already covered under different laws, right? So the thing about EPR
Oh,
at the state level here in the States is that it is state by state at the moment, right? Which is
that's
unfortunate, right?
difficult. That's got to be
Maryland just
so
passed
hard.
EPR. I mean, we have 9,000 different recycling programs across the entire US, right? The Upper Peninsula of Michigan is going to be very different than city center in New York, right?
Right.
So one size certainly does not fit all, but the EPR fragmentation at the state level is going to be a headache. Maybe it's good for consultants to help people navigate it, but the FDA and other federal laws that do exist already are applicable to these medical groups or medical plastic usages and packaging, and so therefore they don't have to think about the EPR as much because they're exempted and or covered by a different federal law.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think the federal law there becomes a federal sweeping EPR legislation to help that? Is that something that goes to the federal level eventually or no?
I mean, it really, I mean, ideally it should, but it won't. I
Yeah.
don't see it. Of course, I could be wrong, but I really don't see it at this point. Mississippi's so different from California, so different than Maine, than the Upper Peninsula, right? I mean, it, it, it's sort of unfair to ask people to do certain things, if it's not appropriate or if they're not able to do it because of the environment in which they operate, right? So it's very, very tough.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
to say there couldn't be harmonization across maybe regionally or at the state level, right? I mean, and the groups that are organizing it, what they call the producer responsibility organizations, the PROs, the same one is doing multiple programs in multiple states. So there will be some commonality, but it
Ah,
don't
yeah.
quite know exactly what that looks like just yet.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's very, very interesting. Has it because of our complex nature is how our government is set up, much different than uh people think of the United States as a country. It's a republic of states, and so there's different structures to the laws, etc. Does it hinder us as in our international trade in this area? Are we behind because we can't be homogenous across all states in this type of thing?
In the trade of
Well, of in your business dealing with those that are packaging and plastics, etc. Do we wind up somehow lagging behind because we can't just have this law and it changes every 4 years and it changes across all 50 states, et cetera? Does it make us more nimble?
yes and no, right? I mean, there's regulation can be a driver of innovation, right? And I
Yeah,
think is that has happened more frequently in Europe for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, things are more expensive. Certain things are more expensive in Europe, so you have to innovate around them, right? Electricity is much more expensive over there, so they've got very, very energy efficient devices.
mm,
Electricity is not that expensive here, so we don't have as much of it, right?
mm,
Our
yeah,
gasoline standards, are very different. We make a lot of heavy trucks. It's just not, regulation hasn't forced that type of innovation here. We let the market sort of do the innovation, but if you're not responding to a need that the market is demanding, then you're not necessarily going to get that same type of output. Um,
mm,
in terms of like hindering like package styles or design or innovation, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, different parts of the world can make plastic packaging too. I mean, it's so lightweight and cheap. There's not a lot of advantages of shipping it from like a high wage country like us to anywhere else, right? Unless there's something very,
right,
very specialized about it. I mean, there are people who import empty packages into the US because the labor rates are cheaper in Asia, right? Now, those things are going to get affected by tariffs for sure, right? If you're bringing in
Yeah, of
a
course.
bunch of empty strawberry clamshells, from Vietnam to California, right? Like, you're going to pay for that. You might not pay for the resin in a tariff, but you're going to pay for the part, right? So, but we have
Right.
capacity here to do that. Like, we can make those here, no problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not a difficult technology to ramp up, and it's not particularly
No,
labor
it
intensive.
still costs us more here for labor in particular, right? I mean, but again, higher costs will drive things in automation, right? So automation is a big thing we talk about in manufacturing in general. Like, there should be more automation, but we've had a labor pool that has allowed us to absorb a lot of this production, without having to go to automation, right? If you go to Denmark or Japan or Switzerland, I mean, like, they've got very high labor rates, 40 euro an hour, and so they've automated a lot earlier. They've integrated
Mm,
Industry 4.0 principles and manufacturing systems faster than we have because they've had to respond to that regulatory or economic um, force that hasn't been as forcefully felt here. At least in my world of plastic in the pack, and that may not be true in all industries, but at least what I see, I mean, it's quite a difference.
gotcha, gotcha. So, man, blowing through the time very quickly, very, very interesting. Who are the core in what's the core industry or within the plastics that you're dealing with? Who needs to reach out to you? Who is your target audience?
Target audience now. I mean, again, if they're considering the impacts of a changing regulatory landscape, and having to understand what happens, if we have to meet, like, if we have to put 25% PCR into our components, like, what does that mean? I mean, what's the cost implication, but what's also the design implication? The virgin material and recycled material don't act the same way, right? So when you look at these um, very, very closely, like, the impact toughness is different or the failure rate is different. So the combination of understanding the material science, the package design, and the policy implication. So for me, at the moment, it's really around converters, I suppose, is probably the simplest way to put it, to categorize the groups, right? Whether it's flexible or rigid, those are the types of packaging groups that I've been working with today.
That you're working with. So those are the ones that
Yeah,
that you
right,
work
people
with.
who are making packages, whether they're out of paper or molded fiber, or they're looking to convert from one to the other, go the other way, all that. So we can help them with EPR fee modeling. We can help them with material selection. We can help them within other industry associations like SPE or IOPP or SPC, more alphabet soup stuff. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
tools that we have at our disposal to help people. Instead of having like 5 meetings to get somewhere, like, we try and get it down to two, right? We want to
So
try
you
and
so
bring
you're are
them up.
you working with their engineers, with their chemical engineers and their product structural engineers, et cetera, in order
Yeah,
to
yeah, it
find those
depends a little bit
solutions
on the.
that because there's so much to it, right? We demand sustainability, et cetera, but then we also demand the performance of the
Right,
materials.
exactly. I mean, and there's some trade-offs, but not always, right? I mean, the first things first. I mean, this cannot fail. This cannot lead to a lawsuit because you put your a weakened part through a form-filled seal line for Gerber baby food, and it caused a total collapse or a recall, right? So I mean, you have to be very. So there's definitely higher levels of sensitivity in different areas of the so food and pharma and medical, right? Very, very high standards, a lot of qualification protocols that you have to maintain, which also makes it much harder for people to change because then you have to requalify everything, and that can take a lot of time and that can be expensive. So you have to weigh that
Uh,
up in advance and assess if that's going to be worth it. If you have to retool, people who move from polystyrene to polypropylene, for example, find that it wasn't a like for like swap, and there was
yeah, it's not a
serious
drop-in
retooling
solution.
issues. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not. No.
no, it's not a drop-in solution. If it was, it'd be very easy to do, obviously by definition, but it isn't. I get it. So it is your group that you're dealing with, or your target audience that you're dealing with there is the conversion of content of their materials.
Yeah, exactly right. So material selection or material replacement plus conversion technologies, and then modeling, what the impact will be in a couple of different scenarios. Most
Mm,
specifically now around EPR, which is usually weight based, but because it is evolving, what credits are going to be applied for higher use of recycled content, it's not clear yet on that. So you have to keep a close eye on that and then be ready to, let people know what's going to happen. In the absence of a big stick, people might not bother to change, but they'll still want to do the study and be ready because their customers are asking them, what are they going to have to do?
Yeah. What's the difficult? What's the difficulty level of? Maybe perhaps it's not even being realized yet, but finding the sources for that recycled or reclaimed content. There's over the past number of years, there's been any number of companies that have come out and said, "Look, we're going to miss our targets, not because we want to, but the content's not there."
Right.
I mean, it's a
That,
pretty
that's
tough market. Just even
it's a very it's
PET is
yeah
the most
it's a
recycled out there, and you can barely find it.
there's not enough. There's not enough that the recyclers say that they have capacity to take more, but we aren't collecting and sorting enough. It's not because there
That's
isn't
the issue.
enough.
It's from my hand, your hand to the right. That's where
There's
the
cost
problem.
at every step. There's cost at
Every,
every step, and that makes
every
it
step.
more expensive than virgin. Even with as few steps as possible, virgin material is just so cheap. It's so easy. It's so abundant. We've got massive overcapacity all around the world. This is a huge structural issue. And people, even though they've said there's a willingness to pay the green premium for more recycled content,
Yeah.
it's not really working out that way. And there's no long-term contracts, which is a big issue. So people have contracts for virgin material; they won't have it for recycled. It's very much a spot market-based trade,
And
and
it's
so
because
people
of
will
the
just walk away.
inefficiency of sourcing it.
Right. There's some new groups like Madium is a pretty cool company that's bringing a lot of transparency into commodity supply chains and bringing
Yeah.
more data in. So that is a prediction I would say for the next couple of years. There's definitely going to be more application of AI tools and new data platforms that allow better visibility into this and will probably take some cost out
Oh yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. No, no.
You
It
still
is
have to get
definitely
enough.
it's definitely an emerging and mature or growing or it's maturing. It's still very very immature as a market. The sourcing of it, it's still very much. If you really dig into it, it's the Wild West in a lot of ways compared to it's a spot
It
market type of
definitely is.
thing.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so certifications and you know rate fluctuations are difficult. The consistency of volume and the consistency of quality vary so much
Right, exactly.
right now. It's
Even
just very
what they call wide spec resin. So if you have, if you've ordered, a couple of rail cars of a particular type of, block copolymer,
right.
and it has to fall within, a certain melt flow index or other, material properties. Something goes wrong at the reactor. There's a power surge or something happens, and then you can't meet that exact spec, and then so it goes out a little bit wider. It's still virgin. It's just it's not exactly as precise. It's a little less precise, but it's still virgin. That sells for cheaper than virgin, and it sells for cheaper than recycled as well. And a
Yeah,
lot of people
yeah.
will use
The
it.
wide
So
spec, the
it's
wide
it's
spec.
it's tough to compete in the absence of stronger regulations, policy, long term contracts.
Does the so there's the for everybody listening out there that doesn't there's other types, but there's post consumer resins, there's post industrial resins, right? Does the post industrial resin, and in particular the purge and or waste rejections, et cetera, within your own operation count towards that? It doesn't.
No, they don't. It's everything's about PCR content, which is
It's all PCR, so it
yeah,
doesn't
that's
matter.
what everybody
Okay.
has to right because that's the stuff that's littered potentially, right? So I mean, you
Well,
can
yeah,
understand
it's
that.
also the most difficult to get the quality and the consistency and recycle it. PIR is a piece of cake.
PR has like typically one heat history, right? So like the polymer structure is still pretty good, right? I mean, one heat history is not uh,
Well, and there's
it's less
consistent
pure
sources of it.
exactly, and you can get a lot of it, and we do recycle a lot of it, right? There's not a lot of it
Sure.
going
Oh
to
no, that's what I'm saying.
waste, right?
There's a lot of that being recycled, but that doesn't count, right?
It doesn't quite right. There's not a lot of credit given for that. Um, Although I think in some sustainability reports, for internal metrics for zero waste and things like that, I think people will record it, and there's some credit or acknowledgement that it is beneficial in terms of the overall environmental footprint and waste management and resource
Well,
efficiency.
does it? I mean, for those companies that cannot, because I'm actually familiar with one here that has the issue. So they create containers, FDA containers, right? Virgin plastics are creating FDA containers like mouthwash and things like that you ingest. They got to be, and it's very much in the OTC kind of pharmacy type of thing, right? Um, but perfectly good looking containers by the tens of thousands of pounds a week are being tossed because of some sort of
Mm.
rejection, because of some sort of I don't understand exactly the regulations that are there, but something occurred with that batch inside there that the FDA is now it's done. They can't certify it. Somebody sneezed by it
So they
or what?
can't. So they
I
can't
don't
do
know.
any. So they're not
Yeah,
doing anything. They're
well
trashing it
they
entirely.
can't even bring it back into their own
Oh,
operation,
yeah.
right? So it has to it's going away. So if somebody else takes that, that should count, right? Because I mean, if I can take that and then use other packaging or something that doesn't
Right.
require FDA, I would imagine there just should be some sort of incentive to do that rather than tossing it into an incinerator or the landfill, because now it's toast, right? And well, I'm not going to get a credit for that, so I might as well use something else, right? Doesn't
No,
I
you're
mean,
right.
I guess it just exposes some of the imperfection in how the laws and everything needs to
It
mature as
does.
we
It
move
does. And
forward,
I
right?
think that the risk factor in anything to do with health, patient safety is that's all people are always going to that's always going to be the trump
Well,
card, right?
and I'm
Like
not arguing
okay,
against the fact that they have to get rid of it. I'm just saying that if somebody else says, "Oh, look, I can use that in something else,"
yeah,
that should be credit somehow.
right. They should,
When you
right? They
have
should be
that type
right,
of,
or
even
even
though that
getting
is
it for free,
strictly
or
that is PIR. I mean, that is
right.
specifically PIR, but it should be a credit somehow, because if nobody else uses it or there's no incentive, they're just gonna toss it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, how do you start? I mean, we have certified programs in traceability for PCR. We probably could have them for PIR on something like that. I mean, traceability is becoming a little bit easier to do. It's a little less expensive, with new digital tools, RFID tags, QR codes,
Mm.
active or intelligent packaging. All these things are applicable. So, that might be an interesting business opportunity for somebody, right?
Don't they
Because
also
you
use
can make sandwich
chemical?
structures with that.
Aren't chemical markers used as well?
Yeah, you can use chemical light markers. They are possibly going to be supplanted by AI sorting tools because the machine learning is just iterating so quickly and building up a big library that it's going to recognize things. So there's NIR sorting, which is a chemical fingerprinting, but it's goes against a database. There's light markers. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's not a technology problem, put it that way, right?
yeah. No,
This is
it's
something
not.
that can be solved by tech. This is not something that is economically viable, or there's not a legal pathway, but it just like you said, I mean, it's not clear that somebody can take this without bringing any risk upon themselves related to FDA clearance or something like that, right? But
Yeah.
that's what could be ground up and put in between two cap layers, right? We see this all the time. We get like recycled content and then two cap layers that encapsulate it, and so whatever's touching is still virgin and meets that criteria.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we need more
Yes.
of that in PCR applications, frankly. Polypropylene in particular, I think we'll see some movement toward that in the next couple of years. There's a few consortium based groups out there, and there's some new technology applied to food grade materials, again through AI sorting, that will possibly increase the available supply of it, but it's going to be expensive. And but if people have to meet, if you have to put 25% PCR content in your PET bottle, now you have to put it in your PET coffee capsule or something. You can absolutely do that. There's no reason you can't do that. You can do it from a technical standpoint. You can extrude it correctly. So sooner, I think we'll start seeing some movement there.
I think so too. A lot of it. Yeah, there's so many things to go at. When you start getting into industrial applications of plastics as well, there's
Totally overlooked,
totally
right?
overlooked.
And a
Yeah.
huge amount. I mean, some of the numbers coming out on the cardboard world, the corrugated packaging. Walmart has 4,500 supercenters or stores in the states, and they recycle more cardboard than the entire U.S. residential system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody really
Yeah.
talks about that, and the cardboard recycling rates, which we assume are very highly recycled, like they've been reassessing how they count this, and it's like 55% or something.
And they've been recycling for decades.
Right, and they're not that good at it, as it
They're
turns
not
out,
that good
right?
at it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, part of the issue is, you talk to people like uh, the Recycling Partnership, and they do a lot of studies and a lot of things, with people. And, one of the most interesting statistics that I read in there was, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80, 83, 84, something like that percent of the people, consumers, presumably private citizens, said that recycling, um, the impact was worth the effort, right? That they would recycle, right? 77% of those people said that they had never been, or not within the last 3 years, been contacted or instructed on how to recycle. And that's a major issue, right? I mean,
It
that's a
is. I
huge
mean,
issue.
you hear this all the time about consumer education and awareness, but it's not the biggest impact that we can possibly have, right? I mean, it's because it's so ubiquitous, and it's on the news, and it's in your LinkedIn, and it's everywhere else. Like everybody's talking about, panicking about straws and reuse and all this stuff. In the big picture, it's extremely small. And
Yeah.
I refer people to this group called Project Drawdown, which is just phenomenally interesting, and it shows you. I think it might be an index of 100 items. Maybe it's not. I might not be right about that on the 100. But anyway, it shows you that the impact on GHG from a number of different areas. And recycling plastics is way down near the bottom compared to things like dealing with, methane leaks and nitrogen runoff and food production and deforestation and
Oh yeah.
biodiversity. These things have such larger impacts.
Yeah.
Does that mean you feel like you can't do much about it, but you feel like you can do something about taking your cup to a recycling bin?
Right.
So, there's a big, big disconnect there. I think, unfortunately, that we're focusing way too much on the wrong thing. Not to say that we shouldn't improve it, but in the bigger picture, it's we have to be advocating for change at different levels, not just like this kind of small scale. Hey, you're you're using boxed water. That's great. Now you're not using plastic. That's just it doesn't really move the needle at all.
No, it really doesn't move the needle. It doesn't move the needle. And a lot of times, plastic packaging is actually worse, or paper packaging is actually worse than plastic, as far as,
Yeah,
you
right,
know.
exactly. But it's hard to
It's not
break that
exactly
that
clean,
perception.
clean technology, right?
No, no, like someone said, between that tree and this paper bowl, there was a little bit of water and a little bit of electricity used.
Just a little bit, just a little bit. Agreed. Unless you go out there and whittle a bowl out of that tree.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
We're not doing that. We're not going to do that. Okay. Fantastic, brother. Our time has blown by. This has been. I really
Yeah, that's
appreciate it.
fast.
You
Yeah.
coming on, man. It goes really, really quick. Who should contact you, brother, and where are they contacting you at?
So the new website is just being revamped this week. I'm just about to release a new specific thermoformed packaging market research report that's
Well, that's
pretty
this week.
focused.
This won't come out for 4 weeks,
Yeah, well, no, that'll be this thing. The report won't be ready until like the middle of May.
so that's perfect.
So it's perfect timing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
perfect
So,
timing.
so
So,
definitely, follow me on LinkedIn for one. I'm not beholden to any one particular material or technology, but for people that are, really want to have like a serious discussion about finding where the overlap of sustainability is with their business, then we should talk. And if I can't help them, then I'll know somebody that can. But just to get more people thinking about it, knowing that there's people that can help them, There's proven models. It's not a journey you have to take on your own. It may hurt a little bit in the short run to change that mental model. But like you
Yeah.
said, I mean, this is business 101. And, more and more people just need to be fluent with it. And we'll try to help them do that.
Excellent stuff. Will Clefs Advisory, CLEFS advisory.com remain the URL?
Yes, that's the URL. Yeah, we're just putting up some new pages and then putting up
Okay,
some
fantastic. So you can go
links
there
that
right
people
now and
can
just
reach out
click on
to.
the find out more right in the middle of the
Yeah,
first
yeah, you can
page
do a
and
basic
contact
contact
you.
form right now. It's
Yeah,
not the by the time this goes live, it'll be the full site. So yeah, absolutely, be great.
fantastic. Fantastic. That's
Thanks very much,
I
Michael.
appreciate it, brother. I really
Thanks,
do. And I
man.
appreciate
Absolutely.
everybody tuning in. Thanks for tuning in and downloading and watching Sustainiacs. Until next time, everybody, hey, peace and love. Peace and love, Connor.
See you, Michael. Thanks a lot.